Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining. We've got some familiar faces as well in the audience. So, as usual, this session is being recorded and we'll be sending you a link to catch up with it shortly after or share it with any employees that you may have internally that you think it might be of interest to. And also, please do start the conversation in the chat. It'd be great to know where people are joining in from and finding out what people are hoping to get out of today. And as always, please do ask lots of questions throughout the session, as I'm sure there's going to be lots of them to come later on. But without further ado, we have a really interesting session today in light of Men's Health Week, where we're joined by James and Claire, also known as Together the Midlife Mentors, to help us uncover more about the midlife mystery and diving into how, as employers, we can make small differences to really help empower our workforce. So, onto a brief agenda for today. Initially, I'm going to be passing it over to Daisy, who's going to be giving us a bit of background onto who we are here at Hussle and why exercise is so important, and especially as we progress through life. And then we'll be handing over for a conversation with James and Claire all about everything that might be going on when we hit that dreaded midlife. But here we go, over to Daisy.
Thanks for that introduction, Sophie. Hi everyone, as Sophie mentioned, I'm Daisy, so I'm Head of Sales here at Hussle. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today alongside James and Claire from the Midlife Mentors. James and I met at an event not too long ago, I think, James, so I'm so pleased that we've been able to get you and Claire on one of our kind of webinars so soon after meeting, and I'm really excited to kind of hear what you guys have got to say. I said to you, James, earlier that I'm quite naive when it comes to talking about menopause, andropause, so yeah, looking forward to taking some good stuff away from today. I'm going to keep the next slides very short and sweet so we can get on to the main event. But for those of you who don't know who Hussle are, Hussle is the UK's most flexible, accessible and affordable way to stay fit and get healthy. We are a corporate employee benefit solution which helps many different kinds of organisations across the UK really take employee wellbeing to that next level. Our platform provides each employee with flexible, heavily discounted access to over 1,500 gyms, pools and spas across the UK, meaning that they can have access to facilities that are close to home, close to the office, or when they're perhaps on the move commuting. Just move to the next slide. There we go. So typically fitness benefits have had quite low engagement rates, and this is due to four main barriers to access that we've identified here at Hussle. The first one being limited location. So as we all know, because I'm sat in my home doing this webinar today, the modern workforce has changed dramatically over the last couple of years. Many organisations now offer hybrid working options, but many individual gym chains don't have enough locations to support that modern workforce anymore. So, they might be working in different places throughout the week. I'm in London tomorrow, and then I'll be back home again towards the end of the week. The second kind of pillar, I guess, is lack of flexibility. So more often than not, with standard gym memberships, and I've been here, done that, got the t-shirt, you're tied to quite hefty contracts for long periods of time. We recognise that, things can change, you could get injured, life happens, people need memberships that are flexible and not restricted. The third pillar, lack of variety of facilities. So people love choice. Some people like hitting it hard in the heavyweight section of a gym. Others, like myself, like sitting in the sauna or going for a swim. So a lot of kind of independent gym chains don't have that kind of choice. So you're often either choosing one thing or the other. The fourth is price. So shockingly, the average gym membership costs around £539 per year. Now that's a hell of a lot of money, and that's often the biggest barrier for people signing up to gyms or a pool or a spa facility. So how did we solve it here at Hussle? So in 2011, our co-founders came up with the idea of Hussle. They broke down those barriers to access and came up with a really flexible, affordable, multi-brand network of gyms, pools and spas across the country for people like yourselves to access with one simple pass. And what we saw with that is that more accessible way of kind of getting active and staying active has shown huge increases in uptake rates among a lot of our corporate partners who we work with. The final slide that I wanted to kind of just touch on here is just to show you our kind of geographical coverage across the UK. So we've compared our coverage with one of the UK's leading gym chains, Pure Gym, which you can see on the left, and on the right you'll see Hussle. So our network, which covers 94% of UK postcode regions, meaning that you're never really that far away from one of our facilities. Claire, I saw your eyebrows raised there. You were quite shocked. It's good, isn't it? So hopefully this gives you kind of a little insight into Hussle and how we work, but feel free to kind of connect with myself or the team if you want to kind of find out more. Before I hand over to James and Claire, as we all know already, engaging kind of regularly in exercise means that you'll have better mood, improved sleep, your heart, muscles and bones will be stronger and a lot healthier, all of which makes such a huge difference to how you feel and how well you handle all the changes that come with the menopause and andropause. But this is a perfect time to hand over to James and Claire because they're the experts and I'm definitely not the expert in this topic. So over to you. Thanks so much for joining us. I guess it'd be great to start with some introductions to you both, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thanks for having us here. I'm going to check out Hussle because I've used it before actually in the past for gym workouts, but I haven't thought about looking for saunas and spas. So after this, I'm going to check that out.
That was exactly what I was thinking. I was like, I do the heavy weights, but I'd like the spa access now, please.
So we're Claire and James, and as Daisy and Sophie said, we're the Midlife Mentors. So our background, very briefly, was I trained in psychology. I'm a coaching psychologist. I worked in that for a while before going off a career in media. I got sidetracked, but in 2011 came full circle back to self-development to launch a retreats business in Ibiza, where I wanted to really kind of recalibrate retreats as they were. At that time, retreats were very focused on weight loss. So it was kind of get people somewhere, feed them rice and beans, beast them hard every day. And I thought, no, let's partner with five-star hotels. Let's actually give them the psychological toolkits they need, looking at things like limiting beliefs, what are nutrition principles you can take away with you. So that was where we started. We started to notice that more and more of our clients were skewing slightly older, kind of late 30s upwards. So in 2019, we started a podcast called the Midlife Mentors, which was basically driven by actually a lot of friends going, well, it's just the beginning of the end. I've just got to accept expanding waistline, low energy, all the rest of it. We're like, no, this is not what the research says. So we started the podcast. That built massively. We had some great guests on there. Off the back of that, we started a group coaching program that was basically a holistic approach, looking at understanding what's going on with hormones at midlife and how you adapt to that in terms of the exercise you're doing, which I know we're going to talk about, your nutrition, but really importantly, a thing that people often neglect is the psychological changes that we undergo at this phase of life as well. We often refer to it as like a second adolescence, and if we remember back how confusing our teenage years were when all those hormones were firing, our brains are rewiring, and we're searching for identity. To my mind, there's a very similar thing happening in midlife. So that's us, and that's the stage. We go into organizations, we talk about andropause, menopause, but also things like stress management, burnout, communication. And we're thrilled to be here today talking about menopause and andropause.
Yeah, and just very, very quickly on my side, because I do think it's important to give a kind of personal story as well, because I wasn't always into fitness at all. I got to the age of about 30 and had a not very nice divorce. And I just spiraled out of control. And I was put on antidepressants. And it was only then, I've been very, very much, my background is coaching, business coaching for Microsoft, stress management. But I'd never looked at the impacts my physical self would have on my mental health, actually. So I was pushed into looking in that area to try and help myself. And so I got a PT, I started looking after my nutrition, I started studying hormones, and through that, I was able to come off the antidepressants and it changed my life. And I think that's the passion behind what I do, especially for James as well, is that mind, body and soul approach to everything. And like you said, Daisy, I didn't understand the power of moving my body, lifting some weights, so not going crazy, but looking after my physical well-being, how that was going to positively impact my mental health and my spiritual health.
Thank you both, and thanks for your honesty there, Claire. I always think it's nice to kind of bring that personal lens into things like this when you're talking about it. People can resonate with it better as well. So thank you both, and again, thanks for joining us. Claire, I'm going to come to you with the first kind of question. Can you explain what menopause is and what stage of life it typically occurs?
Yeah, of course, my pleasure. I'd love to. So most women, the average age that we go through menopause is 51. And it's when our periods stop for a year or more. So that's when we are kind of like officially in menopause. However, there's so much research that's gone on around this, and there's people that are reporting symptoms of perimenopause, which is the bit that comes before menopause, which I would argue, and other people argue, is actually more debilitating, more confusing, because our hormones, we've got estrogen. Let me explain. Estrogen is our primary sex hormone. When we're going through the menopause, it's kind of like on a downward trajectory, and that's why our periods stop. And also progesterone is fluctuating and then drops away, as does testosterone. But in that perimenopause stage, which can start from like the mid 30s, our hormones are fluctuating up and down, and we liken it to, we can have many symptoms. There are about 30 to 40 symptoms that are recognized around the perimenopause and menopause, and they do change over time. Those symptoms do change from the perimenopause to the menopause, but I liken it to, the perimenopause is like a light bulb going on and off, on and off. Sometimes some symptoms will pop up and you'll disregard them because you might think it's stress or just getting a bit older, and then that will go off and another one will come on. So it's a very confusing period of time where you might have a symptom for a while, then it will go, then you'll get a new one, then it will go, and they kind of come in and out like that. So once we have experienced menopause, we're then kind of postmenopausal. And we have things, we might go into this, we have things like HRT that can really help with that. But we always say HRT is not the magic pill. We have to be adapting and using our lifestyle modifications to really help with those symptoms.
Guess it really is quite confusing then, if that's that kind of flicker on and off. Yes. It's hard to track, I guess, yes, as well, and you're kind of thinking, what on earth is going on almost.
Yes, and I know we're going to talk about symptoms a little bit, but that's absolutely what happened to me. And it wasn't until I started talking to other women about this, but also my mum, because we have a generation before us where it was very embarrassing to talk about the menopause, and it was almost like women were ashamed. It was, oh, they're going through the change. So my mum and I didn't really talk about this, but actually what I discovered, I started to experience in my early 40s perimenopausal symptoms that were really frightening, actually. I had my lung capacity dropped, I had heart palpitations, I was always tired, and I didn't really understand, even though I am qualified in this, what was going on. So if I feel like that, how are other women feeling? And my mum actually told me that she went through early menopause as well, through the conversations that I was having with her about what I was going through.
Interesting. It's all about talking about it, isn't it?
Yes,
hence why you guys are here today as well. So, James, over to you. What about andropause then? And what is it, and how does it differ kind of more commonly to the kind of menopause?
Yeah, so andropause, I'd say it's fair to say it's definitely less well known at the moment. But effectively, as Claire explained there, in menopause, for women, their primary sex hormone is estrogen, and that's what's fluctuating and dropping away. But for women, that perimenopause, menopause is happening in quite a narrow window of time, which is why the symptoms are quite pronounced for a lot of women.
Even though it doesn't feel like it.
It might feel like it, yeah. But for men, our primary sex hormone is testosterone. Now that will peak in our 20s, then it'll decline at a fairly steady rate, 1 to 3% per year, which doesn't sound a lot. By the time you're in your 50s, it could be 30 to 50% lower. And then you can start noticing some of the symptoms. So we might have issues with libido. We can get low level anxiety. We can have trouble concentrating. We'll start to have more body fat, particularly around our midsection. We'll lose muscle mass, lose energy, kind of lose motivation. What compounds this is, I think men don't talk about it as much as women. We mentioned talking already. So men, well, we're not talking about the andropause or the role of testosterone. So men are largely unaware of this, right? There was a survey done that something 84% of men over 45 had at least one symptom, but I think it was less than 28% had actually knew about testosterone and andropause. So number one, the knowledge isn't there. But number two, all the research says men don't open up and talk about this stuff anyway to each other or go to their health providers about it until there's really like a critical issue. So we try to raise awareness of it, because the sad fact is that there does appear to be a link between testosterone and andropause and male mental health, and in particular male suicide. So the highest suicide cohort is midlife men, but their suicide rate is actually almost 5 times that of women of all ages, which is why we really need to start talking about this.
Yeah, it's so important to kind of just talk to each other. It's creating those safer spaces, isn't it, for people to feel that they can and they're not going to be judged. But it takes a long time to get there, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. But it's really, really important to open up these conversations like we are doing here. So thank you.
Absolutely. So we've already kind of touched on this a little bit through your answer there, James, but why do you think andropause hasn't been part of mainstream conversation in the way that menopause has? And I know you've kind of touched on it, but could we go into a little bit deeper?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think there's a few reasons. I think the first one is timing. Like Claire said there, you know, people weren't really talking about menopause 10 years ago, you know, and for our mother's generation, it was kind of shameful and not talked about at all. So there's been amazing advances there. We're probably with andropause now where we were with menopause 10 years ago. People are starting to hear about it and be interested, but don't quite know about it. I think there's a timing thing. I think there's a cultural element in that men don't come together in the same way as women and talk about how they're feeling these things. So there's not this kind of shared knowledge base. And then I think lastly, there's probably a structural issue with our health service. You know, the NHS is amazing, but you know, one thing I notice is if you're a woman, then there's regular health tests scheduled for you. You get, you know, prompted for smears, for mammograms, for everything. Men have to go and ask for tests, even prostate tests. We have to go and ask for it, and that's like one of the largest killers of men. And certainly with testosterone, the most commonly requested test for men at midlife is the Tired All the Time test, which is a blood test, and it looks for a load of different things in the blood. It doesn't look at testosterone. So you actually have to go and ask your doctor to get a testosterone test. And the NHS level to be considered low, to be eligible for TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, is actually really, really low. You would be struggling to be functioning properly. So, and if I'm cynical, there's probably a cost implication there, because if we start to make that more available, you know, that's another burden on the national budget. We all know the kind of state that's in. So I think there's a collection of reasons, but I do think we're on the cusp of starting to talk about it more. And we do have to thank women and the explosion in menopause for that. 'Cause I think it's just raised awareness of like what is happening for people in general around midlife and how is that impacting them.
Thank
Yeah,
you, James.
definitely.
Anything to add, Claire, on that?
No, well, you obviously read my mind, Daisy, actually, because I was going to say something and then I was about to hold myself back, maybe because of time. But actually, I would also say that us women can play an incredibly powerful role in supporting men going through the andropause at midlife. And what I see, I don't see this all the time, but I do see pushback from some female HR leaders. I do see some pushback from media, from journalists, female journalists, talking about midlife men's health. And it saddens me because it is not a them and us. It's like a togetherness, and we're not in competition. The andropause isn't in competition with the menopause. We've actually had people say, can you not just leave us to our own hormones? It's our time as women now. You know, really, I suppose, belittling the experience that men go through during midlife. And personally, I don't feel like it should be like that. And I'm championing all the way andropause, even more so than menopause, quite frankly, because of the stats that James just shared, for the fact that they don't reach out for help, that they don't necessarily communicate, and us women do. So, you know, from a grounded, empowered place, I believe that we can really support men going forward and change those statistics.
Yeah. I would just add to that, actually, because you just remind me of something that I think you asked me reasons it's not being talked about culturally. I think we've still got a little gap to jump. So we know that menopause now is viewed as like a really empowering time for women. But I don't know if you've seen in the last few weeks in the mainstream press, there's stories about miserable old man syndrome, grumpy old man going, oh yeah, my husband, my partner, he's just really isolated and grumpy. Well, how sad it is for him. And it's kind of belittling the experience rather than going, oh, what's actually going on there and how can we support?
It's like that double standard thing. And yeah.
Absolutely. It's getting under that kind of initial layer and like yeah, understanding those reasons. Thank you so much. Sophie's going to shout at me because I think I'm going over time, but I'm going to pass it over to her. We're tag teaming these questions, so over to you, Sophie.
So amazing. I was going to add, like you say about the conversation, it is just about opening up and talking. And we've had a question in the chat about how could you start that conversation in workplaces to help support your workforce, both looking at the female members of staff, but also the men as well.
I actually think what's quite powerful is when James and I go into organisations to talk about the menopause, actually. We're both menopause practitioners, and I do think there's something quite unique about when there are men in the room as well. Actually, when men are in the room, it helps create a safe space for them, for James to be there. And we have noticed that they feel a bit more emboldened to ask questions, whereas they might kind of shy away from that. But the fact that James is so openly, comfortably talking about the menopause with me there, and that we're sharing that impact actually as husband and wife, obviously, but as business partners, as male and female, there's something quite unique and amazing that happens there. So I would say bringing that kind of environment into the organization. James actually runs menopause workshops just for men. So again, really ramping up that safe environment, because what we found, I mean, James can speak to this better than I can, but I think this is beautiful. Men have really opened up to James about what's going on for them at home in their personal lives with their partner, with their female partner. And again, it's that really, we're in a, yes, we're in the workspace, but we're all people. So we have those personal lives that impacts our professional life. So actually being able to touch people in those areas and for them to feel comfortable to talk to James, I think is really amazing. But just exploring these topics from that male and female perspective and working out how we can create safe allyship at work.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd echo that. I think it's basically education and empowerment. So it's about making the resources available for people to understand. So, you'll know from your work environment, it's probably not appropriate to go up to someone and go, oh, are you struggling because of this? But they might even not know themselves, right? This is the thing about menopause and andropause. Often people going through it can be like, well, I just feel like a stranger in my own skin, but I don't really know why. So I think the first step is, for any organization, can we just do an education session on it? Just like have something like this, like you're doing, where people can understand what's going on for them. And then probably there's an escalation route. If you feel that something in there spoke to you, there's someone in HR you can go and speak to, and then take it from there. But definitely the whole thing around education and empowerment, I think, is key.
Yeah,
definitely. And I love what you're doing there, where you're having the menopause awareness for men, because I think everyone's touched by it. For example, my dad, he's helping my mum go through it, but might not know everything that's going on. It's so important because everywhere around you, there's someone in close proximity that might be going through either of these life stages. So it's really important.
Yeah, it's that like going back to that communication and that connection again, and wanting to be curious. I think that's a word we use a lot, is be curious about what's going. Let's not assume, but be curious about what's going on for that other person.
As I say, it's really powerful. When I do run those sessions for men, it's quite interesting because men will come to the menopause sessions, but I think they often feel a bit worried about asking the question or potentially saying the wrong thing and upsetting someone. But in a male-only environment, they'll be like, "Oh, what about this? What about that?" So it gives them permission really to ask the things that they've been wondering but haven't known how to ask.
Yeah,
definitely. And no such thing as a silly question. And I feel like in that kind of environment, they can ask away.
Yeah.
And I guess that leads us on to what could be some of the common symptoms that women experience during the menopause.
Yeah, it's a good question. It varies, and like I said, in perimenopause, it can be a whole host of things, to like the really weird and wacky, crazy things like itchy eyes, which is what I had, and then ringing in my ears, and slight dizziness when I move my head. And so all of these things are really common. You've got like the big ones that are more common amongst most women, a lot of women, which is sleeplessness, the hot flashes, the brain fog, the putting on the weight, the achy bones, and yeah, just there was another one there that's really up there, but I can't remember it right off the top of my head right now. But yeah, it's a really confusing time, even to the point where we can get like itchy skin and things like that. So those are the main common ones, and actually just feeling low, from the mental perspective, feeling low, anxious, depressed, having no motivation, having no energy, just feeling tired all the time, which then becomes very cyclical. And it's, this is where something like HRT can be really beneficial, because we're all saying exercise, go out and exercise and lift weights. Well, some women are so debilitated by not having any energy, not getting any sleep. And that affects their motivation, it affects their self-esteem. So actually something like HRT, we do know, can really give that little bit of a lift, a little bit of energy, so that they can start taking care of their physicality a little bit, which, as we know, starts to help them mentally.
Definitely, it's about finding what works for you at that point. It's like you say, it's different for everyone, and it's having that recognition of understanding that what you're going through is probably related to the menopause at that stage.
Yes, exactly. I've just got to say, I saw something just pop up there, which Kay said, for me, it's forgetting words. Kay, exactly. I've just forgotten one of my words as well. So I hear you. And it's about, it's also about just accepting that. And I think the beauty of what we have been experiencing over the last few years is normalizing this and actually it being okay. I think that's when we see other women go, I just forgot my words. I was in a boardroom and I completely forgot what I said. It's okay. It's that lack of judgment now is such an amazing part of where we've moved to with the menopause.
Definitely. And it's getting that point hopefully soon with the andropause as well. So I guess that leads on to what the typical symptoms that men could experience during the andropause even, and how could that affect their mental well-being?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think it's worth noting because I think when we talk about menopause and andropause, we get very fixated on thinking about the word sex hormones and the effect on the reproductive system, which of course it does have. But all the organs in our body have hormone receptors, so they're all affected, which is why, in perimenopause you get things like heart palpitations and stuff like that. For men, it's really hard because it's not a sudden change like it is for women in hormone levels. It's gradual over time. It can be a bit insidious. So how it tends to manifest is a man will suddenly notice that he's maybe starting to, here's a big one actually, isolating a little bit more. So that's not a direct physical thing, but they'll tend to withdraw a bit. And usually that's driven by just feeling they haven't got the energy levels they used to have. They're not as strong. So we lose muscle mass. We start to put on more body fat, particularly around our abdominal area. We get brain fog as well. Testosterone, low testosterone is strongly linked with like low anxiety or low level depression. So we can lose confidence. There's also the effect on libido. Men can experience things like erectile dysfunction, or their libido can fluctuate or disappear. And any of these symptoms in turn can have psychological drivers, right? So the psychological pressures, the psychological levers start to be pulled as well. At the same time, although we're focusing here on testosterone and estrogen, other neurotransmitters are changing. And this is the really important thing. So actually our psychology is changing. The way we see the world is being altered in the same way when we were teenagers, it's being altered. So in a nutshell, most people become more risk averse. We tend to become more and more negative and more fearful. So knowing that, what are the steps we can take to play against it so that we stay positive, we can stay gratitude, stay optimistic. So these are things that are really, really important. But I think for men, it's tricky because it is this slow slide. It's often dismissed as like, oh, it's just old age or it's just stress. Or it could be, but it could also be andropause and low testosterone. So go get your levels checked with a simple blood test, I'd say.
Yeah, and I also just want to speak to the fact that the women, look, because we've just talked about the symptoms that are going on for women, like our libido drops significantly as well. You've got that potentially going on for the guy as well, and erectile dysfunction. This is why it's so important to talk about and bring openness to these conversations of what's going on for the man and the woman, because we're both going through our own experiences of this, which can really begin to separate ourselves, and we can take things very personally. If we haven't got the right information, we're not empowered by it, we're not being curious, we can really shut down to what that other person is experiencing and make those assumptions. So it's really important that we upskill ourselves and that we are able to communicate what's going on for ourselves and be curious about what's going on for the partner as well.
Definitely. Like you say, they come hand in hand and typically they're happening simultaneously.
At the same time. Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I guess the difference is for men as well, unlike the women they've gone through the menopause after a year of no periods, there's no real timestamp to market or even like identify that you might be going through that. So I guess that's a real part of it, isn't it, as well?
Yeah,
Yeah, but
absolutely.
this is a thing, you know, and there's argument. There's some medical say, yeah, well, does andropause exist or not? And it's like, well, you know, testosterone levels do fall for all men, so at some point it's going to be at such a low level you will start to notice the symptoms and effects of it. Now that could happen in your 40s, and here's an interesting fact actually: testosterone levels generally are falling in men. So the average 22-year-old today would have lower testosterone than a 50-year-old from the 80s.
Wow.
So potentially the problem is going to get worse. But you know, you could start experiencing a problem in your 40s. It might not be till your mid 60s, but at some point you'll start to experience some of the symptoms, and then you'll need to make the lifestyle adjustments.
Wow. And Daisy's going to cover now some of the lifestyle shifts that we can turn to make a difference.
Brilliant.
It's as if you're reading our minds and we're reading yours, because it was like you. So this is a question to both of you. What are the key lifestyle changes that can kind of help manage hormonal symptoms for both men and women?
There are so many, and look, we really believe in a holistic approach because, you know, as we've highlighted, I think it's easy to get hung up on the physical changes, but we've got these psychological changes as well. I'll say the first thing is movement and exercise. Now, if you're doing nothing, just make sure you're doing something, even if that's just getting out and walking. But if you want to follow an evidence-based approach, we know for women that one of the side effects of menopause is osteoporosis. I think it's 1 in 2 women now getting it.
It is.
Strength training, resistance training using weights will, you know, preserve your muscle mass, which is declining as you age. So that's going to have a better effect on your body because muscle's metabolically active, meaning it burns calories even at rest, and it's going to strengthen your bones. So we need to start thinking about not just lifespan, but health span, right? So we're all living longer lives, hopefully. But when we're older, we want to still be mobile and strong. So strength training. And for men, again, strength training, if we can lift heavy with compound movements, things like the squat, the bench, stuff like that, you know, that will boost testosterone levels and levels of human growth hormone as well. So regular consistent training will actually help stabilize your hormone levels. The same with cardio. We want to mix weight training with cardio as well. But as we get older, because we don't want the stress hormone cortisol, so cortisol will actually decrease our sex hormones. So being stressed is really bad. So we don't put too much pressure on our central nervous system by training really intense cardio all the time. So usually short bursts of something like a HIIT, but keeping it to 20 minutes is really great. And then maybe at the weekend you do something longer like your bike ride or run. Do you want to talk about nutrition?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we could say around nutrition, of course, but one of the key things I would say is sugar. You know, we were told for such a long time that fat is the devil, but actually we now know that it's sugar. So we know it's inflammatory to the body, to the brain. We know that it raises cortisol in the body as well. So at a time when the neurons in our brain are actually shifting and changing as we're aging with the hormonal effects, we need to be really careful that we're really not eating too much sugar, too much highly processed foods as well, ultra processed foods. So making sure that our sugar content of our food is low. Sugar is in absolutely everything now. I really would start educating yourself on food labeling. We know that anything, I think it's 21.5 grams per 100 grams. If there's that amount of sugar in the 100-gram product that you're having, then that's too high. So just making sure that you've got low sugar. Alcohol, we are not puritanical about alcohol, but we do know that alcohol does lead to low level depression. So if we're experiencing anxiety and depression, it's not going to help if we're sinking a bottle of wine a night. So that's what I would say. There's so much I could say on nutrition, making sure that you're eating enough protein as well. We know that fuels our muscles. It actually triggers a hormone called leptin, which is the hormone that triggers to say that we're full. So eating protein is also going to trigger that as well and preserve that muscle mass and the bone density. One of the things I really want to say on mindset. Okay, so we're looking at those holistic points. We looked at the body, but what about the mind? One of the things that James mentioned earlier is that being risk averse, but also we start looking at what we haven't got. So we're told that throughout our life, I'll be happy when. And one of the things that comes really to the fore when we're at midlife is, am I actually happy? Is this how I want the rest of my life to look? And a lot of the time, that can be a really, really uncomfortable reality is, do I want the rest of my life to look like this? So we talk about the midlife crisis, we make fun of it, but actually we see midlife as an opportunity for transformation, for that really looking at your key values, what's important to you now, and what's the legacy you want to leave. What kind of lifestyle do you want to have? What's important to you? Where do you want to be in 5 years? All of that stuff is so, so important because the hormones are changing our psychology and our emotional well-being. It's really important that we start looking at our minds. And one of the tips that I would say, we tend to look at the things that we haven't got from society. We constantly push these messages of, if you get this, you'll be happy. If you have this, you'll be happy. But actually, most of us feel duped because we might have got the status, the cars, the material possessions, and all of that kind of stuff. But actually, we're still not happy. So we have to relearn. We're not even relearn. We're not even taught how to be happy. So this is the perfect opportunity at midlife. And one of the ways that we can do that is through gratitude. And there is so, so much research around gratitude. Rather than focusing on the things that we don't have, 5 minutes in the morning, not even that, just to be grateful for 3 things in your life. And the crazy thing about that, and I've done this because I used to be a glass half empty person. I hated being like that. It wasn't a nice place to live, we're constantly worrying. So I really put into practice what I had been teaching for so long and really, really focused on those 5 minutes in the morning of being grateful for the things that I have in my life. They might be the same things over and over again. It might be as simple as the cup of coffee and how it tastes, but elevate that feeling by not just speaking it, but really emotionally feeling it. And the thing that happens with that is you start to notice other things to be grateful for. It's like the neurons in your brain we rewire. That's actually a fact. And you can start being more grateful for the things that you do have rather than the things you don't, because that's a way that's going to create misery.
Yeah, I just want to jump in there because it is fascinating. From looking at the evidence from research in psychology, people who are stressed and anxious, the brain actually then rewires to keep you in that state. And like I said, that when people practice gratitude, it can also rewire to be in that state. And there's loads of research. I love this, that optimists, right, experience better life outcomes than pessimists. So people who choose to be optimistic have better luck, let's put it like that, better life outcomes, but they also are healthier, happier, and have better relationships. And the thing is, I think many of us believe that our beliefs and our habits are fixed. We were somehow born with them and they're formed. That's it. It's not true at all. We know that we can change them. So we always encourage people to look at, like, not who am I now, but who do I want to be a little bit down the line, and let's start modeling and moving into that, because it's a really powerful tool to use.
Yeah, most people just focus on the external. So that's really important, like the physical stuff, the nutrition, they focus on the external things, but they don't look at the stories they're telling themselves in their mind, because we know that the beliefs that we have are always going to win out. It doesn't matter. And this is why we constantly self-sabotage. We constantly feel like an imposter because the things we're doing aren't in line with how we think about ourselves.
There's so much to unpick here. I wish we had 2 hours. I'm getting really excited. Just on the gratitude point, my mum she's through the menopause now, but she does in the morning, 5 minutes, she draws a sunshine, and then she does 3 things that she's grateful for. And she told me to do it, when you're going through, you're stressed at work or whatever. And it's so helpful. She still does it now. She's been doing it for a couple of years. It's amazing.
Well, our brain is hardwired to look for the danger. Like, that's how we evolved. So it's constantly looking for the bad stuff that's going to happen. So we have to try, especially in today's world where it's comparison. Like, we're constantly seeing everyone's highlight reels of what people have got that we haven't. So we have to try very, very hard and consciously to rewire our brain to be grateful for this beautiful life that we have.
Absolutely. There was a question I saw I just want to address on we're talking about nutrition around protein. What's kind of the best kind of amount of protein that you should be getting, would you say, Claire? Or
Yeah, I always say, I say for women, 1.2 to 1.5 grams of protein. I always get, is it per pound of body weight?
Yeah.
For men, I'd say probably 1.5 to 2. I mean, if you're training hard and looking to put on muscle, then a bit more, kind of 2 to 2.5.
And some people find it really hard to get that much protein in, which is where protein shakes come in. But again, be very careful that your protein shake isn't full of nasties and chemicals and sugar and things like that. But there are loads on the market now that are low in sugar, thankfully.
So one final question before I go to Sophie. How important is sleep at this kind of stage of life, would you say?
Super important for a few reasons. We still don't really understand the function of sleep because from an evolutionary perspective, it makes no sense at all. You're very vulnerable when you're sleeping. It's time lost when you could be doing something productive, but it clearly has a very important function. We're still exploring that in neuroscience. But what we do know is that if we have consistently poor quality and not enough sleep, it has a negative impact on our hormonal pathways. So we're not effectively recharging or giving our hormones a chance to balance if we're not getting enough sleep. Then also added to that, we know it increases stress. If you've had a bad night's sleep, you've got low mood the next day, you're stressed, you're going to increase your cortisol. If cortisol's elevated, that's going to lower your levels of estrogen and testosterone, and then it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle. Most adults do need 8 hours sleep a night. I say that the best thing to do is try and get in a routine. Where people go wrong is like it's like, oh, I'll go to bed at 6 p.m. on this day, 10 p.m. on this day. Try and get up and go to bed at the same time every day, even at the weekends. Turn off all your screens at least 1 hour, preferably two, before bed, because the blue light from the screens actually interferes with the production of melatonin. Melatonin is a naturally occurring hormone that helps us sleep and switch off. It's kind of the opposite to cortisol. So get off screens. And also, again, if we're looking at screens, we see people that they're sitting in bed in the scroll hole, and it's just like, that comparison, that stress. So yeah, just try and get into a regular pattern of sleep, and it is really, really important.
Definitely. And it's something that when you're trying to fit everything in, it's hard to prioritize sleep, especially when you want to go to the gym, want to perform at work. It's finding that balance, isn't it? And we've had another question about thinking about women have that option of using HRT. And I know, James, you touched on earlier testosterone replacement therapy. How would you go about speaking to a doctor to maybe have that, to start getting involved in that?
So I'd say you definitely want to have an in-depth conversation with your GP, because I think where most women, HRT can be beneficial. TRT, there's a few different considerations with it. So number one, when we introduce what we call exogenous hormones, external hormones, it will shut down our own production. So TRT, if you're going to go on it, it's pretty much, I'm going to go on it for the rest of my life, because you'll shut your own testosterone production down. So that's a massive consideration, obviously. It can affect your fertility. There are ways around that as well. So if you're still considering having children, you're probably aware of that. And it's also contraindicated currently for certain health conditions. But the place to start with your GP is just go, I'd say if you're a man and you're 40 plus, just go, look, I am feeling low, I'm struggling for energy, whatever your symptoms are, I'd love a blood test just to look at my testosterone levels. They'll obviously tell you what your overall testosterone is. Really, you need to know your free testosterone. The NHS won't give you that. But if your total is high enough, then chances are your free is high enough. If it's high, then happy days. You can look at what else it could be that's making you feel that way. If it's low, you've got something to work on. But I would say always start with the lifestyle adjustments first. And listen, I did this myself, right? So over the course of about 6 months, I raised my testosterone 50% just by addressing the lifestyle factors. Because I did a test and I was just below low, and I was like, A few months later, it came up to just over what we call normal, and now it's like on the middle to high end. And that was just through tweaking my training, my nutrition, and sleeping more. So it is possible to elevate it. And I'd say always try and do it yourself with the lifestyle factors first.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that leads on to my question, thinking about, so why is weight training so valuable for middle-aged men, particularly in supporting these testosterone levels, but also, like you say, energy levels?
Yeah, so we know as we age, both men and women, we're losing muscle mass. It's called sarcopenia. It's a naturally occurring thing. So we don't want to be that person that when we're 80, we're struggling to get up out the chair, and if we fall over, we break something. So when we weight train, of course, we're looking to maintain or build new muscle mass. So there's this kind of, I guess, the functional aspect of staying strong into old age. Muscles also, as we said, metabolically active. So if we're carrying more, we're going to burn more calories, because something else happens. As we age, our metabolism slows, and our gut, as it ages, becomes less good at processing food for energy. It becomes less efficient. So if we're carrying more muscle, that's going to help control body fat in terms of keeping that down. But the last point is, hormonally, we know that like lifting heavy weights with compound movements boost testosterone and human growth hormone. So it's a really good way to help slow that rate of decline down. Sorry, there is a final point. We know as well exercise releases all these feel-good endorphins. So in terms of like mood, lowering things like anxiety, just getting out there and exercising can really help with that as well.
Can I just add something about for the ladies out there? You know, I really want to stress the weight training side of things. We don't have to go to a gym. It can be really overwhelming for a lot of the women I work with. I'd say like 97% of the women that I train, they all work out at home, and you can get amazing results actually with your body weight at the beginning, or with some kettlebells, or some bands and things like that. And I would say as well, something that I noticed as I'm going through the perimenopause, which I do really want to say, is I did used to love my cardio, and I loved my HIIT training, I loved my running. But what I've noticed is we know that high levels of cortisol actually make us hold on to belly fat. So if I'm pushing my body, and we know this scientifically, but I've actually experienced it myself now, if we're pushing our body too hard, we're going to hold on to belly fat, but also we're going to be absolutely exhausted. And that actually, because we've got raised cortisol, it's going to make it harder to sleep at night. So I just want to share that I've had to change the way I do cardio. I've dialed it back. I do different things. And at the beginning, that's quite hard if you love your cardio and things like that. But pushing, if you are putting on body fat, pushing on cardio is actually going to make things worse, because you're going to increase your cortisol. This is a mistake we see so many people make. You're going to increase that cortisol, and you're going to be laying on body fat. It's going to be harder to shift. So we need to really change the way we exercise when we start hitting perimenopause.
I just wanted to add two things really quickly as well. So just remember, the first is another health point. Actually, we are now finding a link between specifically between weight training and lowered levels of brain diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia. Now, we're not sure, no one's really sure why that is the case, but there is a link, there's a causality link there. People who weight train have a lower risk of dementia and Alzheimer's. The other thing I'm saying, to Claire's point, is obviously something like Hussle gives you the flexibility to go and try it. It's really important to feel comfortable in your gym environment. You can go and try out loads of different gyms using something like Hussle until you find the one that you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Definitely. And yeah, like you say, it's having that flexibility as well. And Claire, it must be so hard, because I'm someone that loves to run, to then suddenly have to completely do a 360 and think, actually, now you've got to do the to be able to.
It's really hard, but it's really amazing. Like, just talking to James's point about, I think it's amazing that there is that variety of what you offer, because I would be now like, instead of necessarily, you know, the women that might be doing some weight training at home, you can go and have a spa, and you can have a sauna, and you can access these things. That it's about bringing that balance to your life, and being able to do all those different touch points, maybe going for a swim and things like that. So that's how you might want to shift what you're doing normally.
Yeah, it's finding different goals and finding
absolutely.
So I guess, conscious of time, I want to make sure there's lots of chance for the audience to ask questions. One more point from me is, where can listeners find out more about what you do and learn more about your work?
We go to our website, themidlifementors.com. You can actually take a little audit on there, which gives you a personalized report about, you know, where there might be gaps in your knowledge about things like your hormones, your current training and nutrition, stuff like that. Check out our podcast, The Midlife Mentors. I say those are the two best places, really.
Yeah, perfect. Lewis has asked, are there any resources you'd recommend to guide naturally increasing your testosterone levels?
my book. So serious point here. Having gone through this myself, like I went through a period in my life where I actually was experiencing some of the symptoms. I was like, oh wow, I talk about this and I'm going through it. And then I was running a program for a city financial institution, and someone asked me, I said, look, this has been great information, but is there one book where all this is? So the answer was no. So I've written a book called The Midlife Male Handbook, A Man's Guide to Thriving Through Andropause. And it basically talks about everything we've talked about here and more, why you could be feeling the way you are, why that is, what's underpinning it, and what you can do about it. So I say that's the best one. If you're more on the mental health side, there's some great charities out there like Man Up, Andy's Shed, stuff like that.
Amazing. And we will be sharing a link to this recording, and it will also be shared on our podcast as well on Spotify. Another question we have is, what supplements would you recommend for menopause or andropause? They've heard magnesium and creatine could potentially be helpful. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, magnesium, creatine, zinc, these are all really good to help with the hormone pathways. Creatine is really good for kind of like uplifting our energy as well for men and for women. Omega-3s. I would also say there's something called adaptogens, which are herbal. And one of the things that has had quite a lot of research around it for helping lower cortisol and actually again help with our hormones is ashwagandha. Now be careful, because we need to cycle that as well. We don't want to be on it constantly, and there are some contraindications to it. But ashwagandha's had a really good heap of evidence behind it for really helping with our hormones. Do you want to add? There will be some other ones that you want to add.
I'd say for the hormone pathways, like the ones
Zinc and
Claire mentioned,
magnesium.
but also vitamin C and vitamin D3 are really important,
Yes,
and they're
really
also
important.
great for your immune system. I'd say for men, there's a lot of adverts out there for like testosterone boosting supplements. So you probably have heard of things like Maca, Silajat, Tonkat Ali. I have to say the evidence on all those is mixed. It seems to be some people respond, some don't. If you're feeling it, try it. As Claire said, the one that does have a solid research
Ashwagandha.
behind it is ashwagandha for both men and women and helping like balance hormone levels.
One of the things I would just say on that, because James has said there's lots of supplements out there for men, but I would say just be really careful, ladies, on the menopause supplements that have slapped the word menopause on supplements that are just one supplement with everything in them, because actually the levels at which you're getting in there might not be high enough. In fact, they're probably not high enough. So you might want to take, this is what I do, this is what I advise other clients to do, is to take those supplements separately so that you're getting the right levels.
Definitely. And where can you go to find these different supplements? Where's the best
Well,
place?
So I mean,
British Supplements is a good company. They're
we
British.
use My Protein,
Yeah.
bulk powders. So I mean, there's lots of brands out there. I'd say places like Boots are quite reliable. Some other high street health shops, I'd be careful on their formulations. So there's lots of good places to get supplements these days. I'll just do your research online and do a bit of poke around and look at like user reviews as well.
Yeah, British Supplements are good. They got really, really good reviews, and we get some of our bits and pieces from there. But it's quite spread out. But again, just give it a go and don't overwhelm yourself. So if you're listening to this thinking, oh my goodness, they said this, and this, don't overwhelm yourself. Just get a few, vitamin D is really, really important. And I would say the zinc and magnesium would be really important as well. So start there.
Perfect. And I guess another question is, what sort of age does the andropause typically start, or can it be completely varied?
It's going to vary from individuals, but I'd say, if you're a man and you're 45 plus and you're starting to notice some of the symptoms we've talked about, it's probably worth going to get your testosterone levels checked in your blood, just so you know, right? If they're normal, then great. And then maybe it's like every year, once a year, you just get that looked at again.
Yeah, makes sense. Michelle's also just ordered your book, James. So
wow, thank you, Michelle. Thank you.
Sweet.
Any more questions from the audience? And one more from me. What would you say is the biggest myth or misunderstanding when talking about these different topics?
For me, it's that the menopause is just the end. Like there is so much. There's amazing stuff out there around the menopause, but I would prescribe more towards this is actually an amazing time where our hormones are changing, and it's a real opportunity. What I see for a lot of women around the menopause is that actually it's a real time of empowerment. It really, really is. It's a time where we're going through lots of different life shifts and our hormones are changing. And it's a moment in time where I feel like women take back control and go, hang on a minute, I've worn all these different hats for all of my life. And actually, what am I going to prioritize in my life now? What boundaries am I going to set? What do I value? Who do I want to be? And it's like the menopause kind of like really signifies like a time in our life, a significant time in our life where everything can shift, and we want to harness that rather than seeing it as something negative. Harness the change that we're going through.
Definitely. And over for the andropause.
I would say the myth that, like, you know, I hear sometimes, oh, well, my libido's fine, so it must be all right. And it's like, well, you know, that is only one symptom. Are you actually like anxious? You're withdrawing. You're not seeing people anymore. You know, so that's one myth. It's not just about your libido. And then I'd echo Claire's point. At midlife, it's not a crisis. It's an opportunity.
Yeah,
Like, we're living much longer lives. We're much healthier. What do you want to do next? Who do you want to be next?
definitely. And we've had another question in the chat. So one of our attendees is having hormone injections for prostate cancer, once every 3 months. So the andropause means that he's been chemically castrated, basically. Should he try to boost his testosterone naturally, or just try and live differently? What would you say?
I'd say, you know, prostate issues is one of the things that TRT is contraindicated against, and I would guess you probably had a conversation with your GP about that. I'd say, listen, the lifestyle adjustments, go for it, because they're going to make you healthier anyway, regardless of whether it does raise your testosterone or not. They're just good health adjustments to make as well. So yeah, start your lifting heavy, start exercising, you know, clean up your diet, start putting more protein in, eliminate the sugars and the processed foods, and yeah, see how you go with it.
Definitely. Any other questions in the chat, feel free to send them in. So I guess another question from me. So thinking about exercise, what would you say is your number one go-to to help with these symptoms for both of you?
Mine would be weight training over and
Yeah.
over again. I mean, it's really, like I said, for some women it can be intimidating going into the gym, but what we would want to do is kind of, once you've got your confidence, is to go into the gym, because it's going to massively help with the bone density. It's going to help with muscle mass. It's going to help with your self-confidence as well. And, you know, we can start lifting a bit heavier, and actually, even for us women, it will temporarily boost testosterone slightly if we can go a little bit heavier. So one of the things for me is lifting. It changed me in those early days when I was, you know, in depression. It was the lifting that really helped me. It gave me that sense of power back, and feeling strong. And that's not just physically strong. That has an amazing impact on our mental health and how we see ourselves.
Definitely. It really helps with it helps you setting goals as well, short-term goals for you to
Yeah.
track your progress as well, which makes a huge difference. And James, what would you say yours is?
Well, I had Claire, you know, like for men, lifting weights, definitely. But I also recognize that, you know, that doesn't float everyone's boat. So I'd say, where can you get a similar physiological experience with like a power sport? Maybe you take up rowing, maybe you find like great circuits classing, where, you know, when you're mixing up battle ropes and kettlebells and stuff like that. But it's so important. And the last point I'd say, not exercise, but for men and women, is stay curious,
Yeah.
because curiosity is what makes life interesting and keeps us in a growth state, and helps our brain health, and helps us reach out and speak to other people and have that community and connection, which is so important as we age.
And on that, like the classes as well, you know, a lot of people find that accountability of going to a class at a gym really helpful, where it might mix a bit of cardio and some weights. It's another really good way of being curious and starting something and having that connection, that community as well.
Definitely. And one last thing from me. So we're really grateful having you on today's session. For the audience members, how can they get in contact with you, get involved, have you potentially speaking at their organizations to help them? What would be the next kind of steps to further the conversation?
I think just reach out to us. Our email is team@themidlifementors.com. We can point you, you know, we can jump on a call. We can have a discussion about what some of the challenges are, what some of the things that you're looking for, and we can tailor that experience and send you some more information. But yeah, unless you've got anything to add, that's probably the best way to get in touch with us.
Amazing. And anything else from you, Daisy?
No, I just want to say what a lovely session. I feel so empowered now, but I love that kind of reference to education and empowerment from both of you, James and Claire. I think that's so important. It's giving people the right tools to feel confident, empowered to go and kind of, you know, embrace the change almost, rather than kind of go, oh my God, this is really scary. But thank you both for being so passionate about it. Lots to take away, as I suspected. So yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for having us on. I mean, we've absolutely loved it. We love talking about this stuff and sharing our
As you
knowledge.
can tell,
So
as you can tell. Thank
Lots
you
of
so
stuff
much
there.
for having us.
Amazing. And we've had a conversation in the chat that people are really keen to continue the conversation. So I will be setting up a LinkedIn group after this of everyone that's joined so people can carry on this conversation and have it as a bit of a support network and just to carry on speaking because it's so important.
Yeah, and we'd love to be part of that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
brilliant.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Amazing. Well, thanks again. And I'll be sending over the recording slightly later today. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your day and stay curious.
Yes, and you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
see you later.